The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
Welcome to Half Size Tuesday, everybody. Finals week rolls on. It's Fantasy NBA Today, brought to you by Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee Company. I'm Dan Besbris. This is a Hoop Ball presentation. Massive thank you all season long. I really want to... I'm laying it on extra thick right now, and I should have been doing this perhaps this thick all season. We sort of did, but now that things are starting to wind down a little bit, I really want to take the time to thank Hawaiian Isles for getting on board with us here and partnering with Hoop Ball. They are our initial podcast partner. We've never had one before, so it's really awesome for me. In fact, looking all the way back, I've pioneered a couple of podcasts in my day. I don't know if many of you listen to me when I make my weekly satellite radio show appearances on VSiN with my buddy Gil Alexander, and he says, the only man in the world with a podcast before me. That's how he likes to introduce me. I guess that sort of makes me like a hipster podcaster. This was 2009. It was really in its infancy, and I started a show called Today in Sports Betting. It was a podcast. It was the very first sports betting podcast that wasn't just about selling picks. It was actually breaking the games down. It was handicapping. This is not the point of the story. Point of the story is I had that thing running for a couple of years. I've had Fantasy NBA Today now running for the equivalent of about, what are we at now? 2 full seasons, and then we had that sort of mishmash first half year. And I've never had an official podcast sponsor before. We had things we were promoting over at pregame. We promoted stuff here at Hoop Ball. We promo stuff all the time, but we've never had an official sponsor until Hawaiian Isles came along, and it's so cool. And we're so lucky to be working with them. And you should check them out. HawaiianIsles.com, at HI Kona Coffee on Twitter. Hawaiian Isles, if you search for them on Amazon, you can get that joint sent straight to your doorstep. Prime. So thank you to Glenn over at Hawaiian Isles for partnering with us. We got a podcast that runs throughout the offseason as well. So, while winding down, it's a different kind of beast. We'll have lots of different voices on the show in the offseason. All of your favorites here at Hoop Ball will be coming together to work basically on one podcast for a couple of months. We have a plan. And I'll tell you about it later in today's show because that's not the most important thing. Most important thing is, again, we'll put out the clarion call. If you're a neophyte programmer, you want to get involved over here at Hoop Ball, let me know, at Dan Besbris on Twitter. But the most important thing, obviously, the most important thing is your fantasy playoffs. They are happening. It's happening. It's a scene, man. It's happening, and we are desperately trying to hang on for dear life. Day 1 of the finals are in the books. And it was a fairly uneventful day. Just 4 games on the slate from Monday night. We don't have a whole lot of things to talk about from a game-to-game perspective. A little bit of stuff. Philadelphia was without Ben Simmons. He had gastroenteritis. Ouch. The poops, as we call them in the non-medical world. You thought that would mean a little bit more from different guys, but they just got smoked by an Orlando team playing pretty good basketball right now. Evan Fournier's gotten hot these days at the right time. Vooch has just been great all season long. And Michael Carter-Williams actually had a great 20 minutes off the bench in this one. I don't think it's something that I would trust would happen again, but it took the shine off of DJ Augustine, who'd been playing very well and was a pretty popular streaming option given the Magic's 4-game week that ends on Saturday. Well, that didn't work. Who the hell streamed Michael Carter-Williams? Nobody. It was Vooch and Fournier were the big stories in this game. In a contest where they scored 119 points, you would have thought there'd be more stuff, but not really. Magic continue to be a decent team. If you picked up a Magic, you should just ride it out. I know it wasn't great for Augustine. I'm sure he'll be better in the next one here against Miami tonight. It's a pretty easy travel schedule. This is a home game for Orlando, so they just shoot south from Central to Southern Florida. You don't have to think that there's going to be much of a fatigue issue here. For Philadelphia, you don't have a whole lot of choices either, because almost everybody on that team that's worth using is a big-time name. other than, obviously TJ McConnell, who played 29 minutes in this one with Ben Simmons out. If you have Ben Simmons, you're holding him. If you have Jimmy Butler, Tobias Harris, Joel Embiid, you're just holding them for the 3-game week. You're not going to punt on the 76ers. If you were, it would have been probably before the week started, and that would have been kind of a weird thing to do. Their schedule is just not built to work around anything. Even though it's only a 3-game week, it's a game to start the week, very rare, and then 2 off days, and then they go Thursday, Saturday. So that team's a mess from a streaming perspective, and then again with Orlando, you're just riding it out. Memphis wins again. They are really fighting to convey their pick. They want to get rid of that thing. They want to be out from under the whole, have to give their pick away, get into the rebuild, don't worry about this stuff going forward. It's an interesting little conundrum. I don't think they're going to get there. They're 30-44. They lost way, way too many games to, what are they? I think it's top 8 protected. Well, you know what? I guess they could get there. They're third from the bottom in the Western Conference at 30-44. The 30 and the 44 are the numbers you have to be worried about here. Wizards are also 30-44, so they're tied with Washington. The Hawks, the Bulls, the Cavs, and the Knicks are well behind them. Nobody's getting anywhere down near those guys. And the Suns are well behind them. The Mavericks are just right behind them, just a half game back of the Grizzlies in the win column. So what did I list off? 6 teams. So right now, they're tied for the 7th worst record in the league. Grizzlies are actually capable. If they can pass the Pelicans, and if the Wizards fall behind them, they could actually get rid of that pick. I think that's what it was, right? Top 8? Somebody, you guys can correct me. I'm sure I biffed this one. I should have Googled it before I got into the Memphis thing. At any point, this was without Mike Conley, who missed this game due to, I think there was a quad or a thigh. It was a leg thing. And so Delon Wright, who already was set to have a pretty good week in a 4-game spot, really blew up with a career-high 13 assists. He's got a really nice week ahead of him. I would assume Conley is going to skip half of the back-to-back at the end of the week as well. Question is, does he play either of the 2 games in between those? I mean, you might just get a massive Delon week and nothing out of Mike Conley. I don't know. Lakers and the Pelicans would like to lose. Same with the Timberwolves, although they may be too far ahead of the Grizzlies to fall that far. Lakers 2.5 games ahead of the Grizz. Pels just a half game. So Memphis, there's a little bit of room left. There's only 8 games left for them. Lakers have 9 games remaining, if I'm not mistaken, so a tiny bit more. What does that mean? I mean, Memphis is basically going to have to go something like 4-4, I would think, to guarantee they get rid of their pick. They're not going to get better than the Hornets. The Wizards could fall behind them. That would be 5 teams out east. And if they can get 3 teams out west, then they're in business. So they got to get the Wizards and the Pels behind them. And then the Lakers would just be gravy, I guess, if either of those other 2 teams doesn't fall behind them. Based on how tanking's going, they got a shot. Anyway, point of all that is, Memphis is playing hard right now, and the young guys are really going for it. Jonas Valanciunas, 18-14, he's been rolling along. Even Justin Holiday had a good ball game. Bruno Caboclo blew up for 24-11. I don't know if we can trust that'll happen again. Tyler Dorsey, 21-8 in this ball game. This was an interesting one for a number of reasons. I don't know that I trust that a lot of this will happen again. Delon Wright, I think, is trustworthy. Jonas Valanciunas is. I'm probably leaving the rest of those guys alone, especially now that Memphis knocked out one of their 4 games this week. So they got 3 starting on Wednesday with a 2-off day. The only other time I think you'd look at the Grizz would be the back-to-back Saturday-Sunday for a streaming situation. Oklahoma City, for most of this game, could not hit a shot. They gave it a little bit of a run late. Dennis Schroeder was one of the few bright spots. Paul George ended up with 30-12, but it took him 29 shots to get there. Insanely inefficient game for him. Russell Westbrook had 16 points on 20 shots, so he was actually worse in that respect. They just weren't ready. They were not ready for this ball game. They got 4 games this week, though, so life will get better for them. The big men for OKC have been going through kind of a weird patch, but Steven Adams did have 7 defensive stats, so I guess it could have been worse. Phoenix blown out by Utah. No surprise there. Rashawn Holmes got ejected in this game, which is a real pisser because I had him to start the week in a situation where I figured I would run him out for 1 game, get some field goal percent and some defensive stats, and then flip him for someone else. Yeesh. Mikal Bridges was terrible. I mean, Utah just rocked everyone's world. Devin Booker had 59 in this one, and he was all by himself. The team scored 92 points. I mean, that's a ridiculous number. Nobody else could hit a shot to save their lives. Utah, as expected, decent lines because no one could do anything with them. I mean, Phoenix was horrible. Rudy Gobert, 27 and 10. Derek Favors, 18-8. Couple of blocks. Ricky Rubio was good. Ingles continued his second half surge. The only disappointment in this one was Donovan Mitchell. And it was a pretty notable one. He wasn't good. He was not good. And now I'm thinking, I got to look back and see what team I'm playing against that has Rudy Gobert. I'm sure there's somebody out there I'm fighting that has him. Maybe not. Maybe I got lucky. And the late one. And this is the gross one. I mean, this is like, I almost don't even want to talk about it, but I think you sort of have to because it was arguably the story of last night, and we've been dancing around it a little bit. Double overtime Portland win over the Brooklyn Nets. But Jusuf Nurkic, a disgusting leg injury. I mean, I was working away here. This is after the kid goes down. So it was like, what was it, about 9:30, 9:45 here on the Pacific Coast. And I had recorded a lot of the podcast. I like to knock that sucker out because if there are a bunch of early games, I can take care of a lot of the recap part of the podcast and looking ahead a little bit to the next one. And I was rolling into double overtime. I was feeling great. I have Dame and Seth Curry on one of my teams in the championship round. And I'm thinking, this is freaking gravy. Just rolling up extra stats from a numbers standpoint, which is the way that normally you ought to be thinking about this stuff. Even in a limited sample size, you figure if Dame and Seth, both play the extra 5 minutes of a single overtime, that's 10 extra minutes of game time. That's basically like an extra quarter of a game on your week, right? And we're always talking about trying to maximize the games during the week. Maximize your games during the week. And a really simple way to do it is obviously streaming. The other way to do it is get lucky. You know, if you're trying to win games of the week, an extra quarter of a game is fantastic. And then it went to double overtime. That's 20 extra minutes of actual playing time for my two guys. 20 extra minutes is effectively a half of basketball. It's a half of a game. It's a little bit more than half of a game for one of your guys. So I got an extra half game last night just out of sweet bonus that I had two dudes in the same game that went to double overtime, and then disaster struck. And I don't have Jusuf Nurkic anywhere, which is one of my massive regrets this year. He was a guy that I talked about at the end of the offseason as I thought a post-hype guy, and he ended up going earlier than I expected. My hope was that he would fall a little bit farther. He ended up going in like the 6th round of a lot of drafts, 5th, 6th round, like around 60. I thought maybe we could get him closer to 75, and I got too greedy, and I didn't get him anywhere. But this is still just devastating. Number 40 ranked fantasy player, the key to Portland's resurgence this year. The team that I had pegged as going to be dealing with stagnation syndrome, and Nurkic helped them overcome that. He was really the key because the jumps he made season over season, just remarkable. Career high in scoring. Tied his career high in rebounding. Tied his career high in assists. The only numbers he was down off of were the steals and blocks. And here's the thing. That was part of the 2016-2017 season, the 20 games, remember when he went crazy with Portland at the end of the year? He was matching that for the entire season outside of the steals and blocks, but he was still over one of each of those. I mean, this was, by all accounts, a massive career year for Nurkic. He was putting it together for an entire season. Free throw number was way over his career mark. Career 66%er was shooting 77% this year. That's huge for his value from a fantasy perspective. And a disgusting, just a gruesome leg injury. And, you know, the game was on NBA TV. I have League Pass, so I could have watched it anyway. But I was watching it in double overtime and just looking to see which of my guys might be able to sneak a stat here and there. And you saw Nurk go down, and you saw the freak out, you know, the writhing where part of him wasn't really moving. And the cameras showed it just briefly. And I'm not going to go into any kind of detail on the podcast because I'm sure if you wanted to see it, you already saw it. But suffice it to say, his leg was pointed in the wrong direction, and they had to stretcher him off the court. As of this morning, the Blazers have released a statement that multiple fractures to the tibia and fibula, I think it's got to be the fibula, right? No? Let me double check on that. No, it's a fibia. And so I don't know what the timeline is on this. It's right in the middle. It's basically near your shin, if you wanted to sort of just point it out to a less medically word. The break was near the shin. You could see the snap. It was really gross, and he'll be out for the rest of the season, and I would guess he'll miss part of next year as well. This is a big deal. Crushing injury for Portland fans, for the Blazers, for Nurk, for all those guys. I mean, you just saw, Nurk's face himself, he was turning pale on the ground as they were trying to figure the whole thing out, and then they were showing all the players' reactions. I thought Mo Harkless's was arguably the best because he was sitting on the bench and he had his jersey just bitten in his mouth. He was biting his jersey between his teeth and staring. Anyway, so that sucks. From a fantasy perspective, and you hate to have to do this, but we do, one would assume that Enes Kanter's minutes are going to trend up from 20-ish per game to probably closer to 24, 25. I don't think they're going to max him out, though, because he can't play defense. You're going to see Zach Collins play a little bit more. You might even see some more Myers Leonard. The last time Nurk went down, we saw a decent chunk of Myers Leonard on the floor. I don't know if that's going to be the same. That might be the role that now goes to Kanter. But I'm thinking you'll probably see about 25 of Enes Kanter, probably 23-ish, maybe 20 of Zach Collins, and then there will be some weird lineups where like Al-Farouq Aminu plays center or something like that. So, yes, it definitely helps Enes Kanter a lot. It helps Zach Collins a lot. The question is, does he get over the cut line? And the answer is I don't know. I kind of want to see who's with what unit. I would imagine that they'll keep Kanter with the second unit. I think they'll play Collins or Leonard with the first unit because those guys can defend a little bit. And with Dame on the floor in the first unit, that's not when they need the most scoring. Back, obviously, when C.J. McCollum was healthy, they had even more scoring punch in the first unit. But I would think they'll play with someone who's a little bit more defensively inclined with Lillard, and they'll probably play Enes Kanter with the second unit. So if he's getting roasted, it's not by some of the best players in the NBA, it's by their backups. We shall see. I still think that you're going to get enough now. Kanter was already hovering right on the edge of fantasy value, and this, to me, pushes him over the mark. So he's a guy that should probably be picked up if he wasn't already in your league. He'll have a decent run. You're going to have to see more from Damian Lillard. I know it's not a one-to-one correlation here, but Nurkic was taking a lot of shots every game. He's taking 12 shots a night this year. Those are not all going to go to Enes Kanter and Zach Collins. You might see 3 more to Kanter, 3 or 4 more to Collins. That still leaves another 4 to 5 shots floating around out there. Those are probably going to go to the main scoring guys. Couple to Dame, couple to Seth Curry, maybe 1 to Rodney Hood, 1 to Mo Harkless. So it's going to get split up a little bit. And if you have the Blazers, the other guys are just going to have to do a little bit more. I think if you were streaming guys like Seth Curry, you just keep rolling them out there the rest of the week. I don't think this is a spot where you make any sudden adjustments. And, now that they only have 3 games the rest of the week, the only time I think I would advise moving to a Portland Trailblazer is if you have someone who only has 2 games the rest of the week. I don't think you're going to make that lateral move for any of these fringe guys that were not yet picked up, like Rodney Hood. Hood, by the way, ended up playing 43 minutes last night. That was kind of an interesting little footnote. Harkless is useful these days. Seth Curry's useful. Dame's useful. And now I think it'll be Kanter that slides into the mix. And then on the Brooklyn side, their schedule is weird, right? They had a game last night, and then they go Thursday, Saturday, much like Philly we just talked about earlier. So they're not a really good team to stream. D'Angelo Russell with the 3-game week is worth deploying, and then I don't know if anybody else really is on that team. People sort of show up and disappear. Jared Allen, maybe. He's been a little bit up and down. And thus ends a very short recap of Monday's card. I mean, this is like, you throw me a 4-gamer, what am I going to do with it? It's already going to be a short podcast. Today, if we make it to 25 minutes, that might be our goal in this one. And that's okay. You guys were warned. Hey, the one thing I forgot to mention is Canner hit a couple of 3-pointers in that game last night. That was weird. Frankly, I'm not that excited about him taking 3-pointers. This is a guy we picked up, if you picked him up, if it's a streaming thing or you're just sort of sitting on him, for points and rebounds and percentages. And if he's taking threes, that has the prospect of driving percentages down. Now, it didn't really do it yesterday, but it could. I know. Who cares, Dan? Limited sample size. Maybe everything will be fine. Tuesday. It's a big Tuesday. This is sort of reverse action. Oftentimes, Wednesdays, Fridays are the big days. This week, Tuesday is the big one. Tonight, we got a 10-gamer. San Antonio is in Charlotte. Just things to keep an eye out on with this thing. We saw a report surface on Twitter yesterday that Popovich would love to start Jakob Poeltl the rest of the way. He's a guy that we've been pushing. Not a great schedule this week. Spurs had their 4-gamer last week. They go into a 4-gamer next week. I'm totally fine with you dropping Poeltl on Friday if you want to get 2 games those last 3 days of the week. But if you're in a situation where you're not forced to stream and you can hang on, he's a solid 9-cat guy right now. Charlotte is without all sorts of bodies. They're finally starting to throw in the towel a little bit. So we're seeing more Miles Bridges. We're seeing more Dwayne Bacon. We're seeing more Willie Hernan-Gomez. And guess what? I don't care, because this is their only game the first 4 days of this week. And if you're using a Hornet, it better be Friday, Sunday, and then rolling down the stretch. They're in the midst of a very bad stretch of schedule. 1 game in 4 days is one of the worst stretches you can run into at this point in the year, outside of a team like the Knicks, 2-game week, that kind of deal. This is another one. If you had a Hornet, I hope you got out from under them at the start of the week, outside of Kemba and Jeremy Lamb. Boston and Cleveland, a couple more 3-game weeks. Cleveland is an every other dayer. Boston goes today, and then they've got a back-to-back Friday, Saturday, which is intriguing only because guys are missing games. Kyrie is out for this one. Jason Tatum is doubtful or questionable. What was the latest tag on him? Doesn't matter. We'll see if he's a game time. We'll call it a game time decision because it might be, it might not be. I don't know. Al Horford has been missing games, so they're just throwing whoever out there right now. Boston seemingly doesn't care a ton about seeding. They just want to get healthy. And that opens things up in that Friday, Saturday back-to-back. The possibility that some whack job might surface as a useful fantasy player, like a Gordon Hayward, because when people are out, he might actually get minutes, and there's a possibility he got dropped in your league. Like, there's a legitimate chance that he's not on a fantasy team right now, which feels crazy, but it's the honest-to-goodness truth. Cleveland, they're every other day, so if you're stuck with a Cav, you're sort of stuck with them until potentially Sunday. If your season's over, you could punt them then. Chicago, bad news Monday afternoon that Zach LaVine and Otto Porter ruled out a day in advance, and Chris Dunn was listed as doubtful last report. So they might be without all 3 of those guys. They don't have a good schedule this week. It's a back-to-back, and then they play on Saturday. What it means likely is that if all 3 of those guys don't go tonight in Toronto, they probably aren't going tomorrow at home against Portland either. So to me, it feels like now best-case scenario is 1 game out of any of those 3 guys, and that makes none of them worth using. I am most likely dropping any of those 3 guys if they're on my fantasy team. Zach LaVine is the only one. Well, Otto Porter, too, although he wasn't even playing, and then Zach LaVine sort of went from game-time decision to not playing at all. Those 2 guys, if it was a 2-game week, would actually be a question. 3-game week, you'd obviously ride it out. 1-game week, there's really almost nobody in the NBA that's worth using. Maybe James Harden is probably your only one right now. And that's what you're looking at. Basically a 1-game week from these dudes. So I'm most likely dropping Zach LaVine today. Sad truth. I can't take zeros from a slot in my finals. And I know the guy I pick up isn't going to be nearly as good. 3 games out of Zach LaVine would be better than 4 games out of anybody on the waiver wire. But 4 games out of almost anyone on the waiver wire is better than 1 game of Zach LaVine. Think of it this way. Best game LaVine could possibly play against the Raptors on Saturday. So it's going to be a tough one, too. It's not like you can just run over the Washington Wizards pastry defense. This is a good team they'll be playing tonight and then again on Saturday. Best case scenario there is what? Like 35-5? And that's a big one, too. It's probably not going to be that good, even if he does go. 4 games to get to 35-5 out of somebody? You can definitely do that. Run the math. 7.5 points, 1.25 rebounds and assists. Yeah, that guy's on your wire if you're in a 12-team league, especially this time of year. All sorts of weirdos are popping up. And there are plenty of teams with 4 games that you could go to right now. Denver, both Los Angeles teams, Sacramento, Washington. Somebody's going to surface. Even if you've got to dig deep, even if you got to go to like a Troy Brown in Washington, or an Alex Caruso, or, the Clippers, I don't know if I'd venture too far deeper than what they've got right now. But if Landry Shamet has to miss any time, then you might see like a kind of a puffy, overweight Wilson Chandler surface for a couple of ball games. So there's guys out there that are playing 4 times that you basically have to grab because you can't trust these guys in a 1-game week. Well. Toronto, that's a 3-gamer this week. They go every other day like the Cavs, so if you have a good Raptor, you're just sort of stuck with it. If you don't, they're not really worth streaming because Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, they're not really off days this week necessarily. Orlando, we already talked about them. Miami, finally their schedule hits a little bit of a snag, same as Toronto and Cleveland. They're Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. They've got some interesting names popping up. Justice Winslow was questionable last we checked, so that's actually something that I would keep a very small eye on. My guess is that if you're in the fantasy playoffs, he probably got dumped. So if he plays, maybe he's worth using. Like take a guy, someone else. You wouldn't gain a game, unfortunately, because most likely whoever you're dropping still has 3 games left this week, but not necessarily. If you have a Phoenix Sun, perhaps, with only 2 games the rest of the week. We talked about the Jazz. They only have 2 games the rest of the week. Teams that played yesterday, Brooklyn, that only has 2 games, so maybe you could make a move to a Heat to gain a game. I'd rather you go to a team with 4 games starting tonight. Really put yourself in a nice spot that way. You could gain 2 games with 1 move. We talked about it on yesterday's podcast. But you do what you got to do, and maybe a guy like a Winslow in 3 could potentially blow up. He might not even play. And Orlando has a pretty good defense, so maybe I'll rethink that. Houston in Milwaukee, another pair of 3-game teams. A lot of 3s this week. Houston, same deal. Every other day. Milwaukee, a little bit different. Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday. So their schedule actually would be a little bit more front-loaded. If you're streaming a buck, I don't know who it is, Pat Connaughton, I guess. Not an advisable move. Same deal with Houston. There's nobody here that should be picked up for 9-cat or for streaming purposes. Neither one of these teams. Waiver wire should not have any relevant names on those clubs. Atlanta, another 3-game team. New Orleans, another 3-game team. Atlanta goes tonight, and then they don't play again until Friday. So you're not picking up anybody on that club right now. You could go Friday, Sunday with them. We mentioned a couple of these teams that have 3 games every other day, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. If you wanted to punt on those guys after Thursday, trade them in for a team like Atlanta that has 2 games in the final 3 days. One of these guys could become relevant from a streaming purpose. Category-specific stuff, like Vince Carter for 3s, DeAndre Bembry for steals. There are probably some names floating around that could be useful, but it's very much a specific situation. Pelicans, kind of the same deal. They're the front end of that situation, where the Pels are tonight and Thursday, and they don't go again until Sunday. This is a team you probably would have wanted to make a move before the week started to get 2 games the first 4 days. You're not picking them up now. But you do have some specialists, Kenrich Williams, rebounds and steals. Frank Jackson, inefficient scoring. Sounds like Anthony Davis is going to try to play his 20 minutes in these games because they're home games. That seems to be the situation here. He's trying to play the home games, which means that guys like Randall, Cheikh Diallo, Julio Okafor, they all take a little bit of a hit. Clippers, 4-game week starting tonight. They are a nice bunch as of this point forward. So the main guys, Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell, Danilo Gallinari, Patrick Beverley, their schedules are all lined up. You're going to ride those guys. But because of the 4 games, you could probably extend it to Gilgeous-Alexander. He gets the bump into the mix. Very good streaming option. Beyond that, I would have said Shamet, but with the injury, him being a questionable tag, you'd have to wait basically until game time tonight to get an idea of whether or not he's playing. And at that point, you might have missed out on some of your other options. So I don't know if you want to do that or not. Minnesota, the other team in that ballgame, I lost my train of thought for just a brief moment there. We'll leave that in the podcast because you guys can see it happens to me too. Bad part of the schedule for them. They go tonight, then they've got 2 off days, but they do go back-to-back Friday, Saturday. So there's an opportunity there for a late week stream. Remember we were talking about teams that go 2 or 3 times in the early part of the week. You could back it up with Minnesota and then still drop that guy again on Sunday. And that's a spot where you could use 2 roster moves to take likely a 4-game week and turn it into 6. So you get 1 extra game per move. The question is, you're making the decision, if I get 1 extra game per move, I want to make sure I'm getting a good player. So like a Josh Okogie or a Tyus Jones, they fit that mold. Sacramento, their outstanding playoff schedule continues there, which makes guys like Nemanja Bjelica more relevant. Marvin Bagley has come back, and he's mostly hurt Harrison Barnes. He also hurt Bjelica a little bit as well. Willie Cauley-Stein has been a mess, but he's likely trustworthy because of the 4-game week. Dallas, 3-game week. This bumps some guys out. You're still rolling with them, but not a great schedule because they do have a game on that last day of the week, so you're sort of stuck with them most likely. Dwight Powell, I think you're still using. Luka Doncic, yes. I don't know if anybody else makes the cut in a 3-game week. I mean, depending on your format, you might throw in a Maxi Kleba. And then in a 9-cat, it's definitely Kleba. He's absolutely in. Detroit, they're down to a 3-game week now, so you're probably getting out from under some of these guys. Denver, another 4-game week. They're a good one. All 5 starters are the guys I'd use on Denver. I don't think I'd venture any farther into the mess. And the Washington Wizards and Los Angeles Lakers, a pair of 4-gamers, even still starting tonight. Lots of really good options here, and I'll tell you why. Number 1, Lakers, it sounds like LeBron is going to play in this one. He's probable, which means he's probably going to skip the back-to-back in altitude, which means your other Lakers are going to get a big bump tomorrow. Then they've got Charlotte, doesn't play much defense, and the Pelicans, who don't play much defense. Lakers have a really nice schedule here coming up for the non-LeBrons. Wizards, not quite as great a schedule. They do have Lakers and Phoenix to start the week, so they should run up some numbers there, but then at Utah and at Denver. That's a little bit rougher. Still, with Washington, I think finally pulling the plug, the one thing I really want to know before this ballgame tonight is Thomas Bryant remaining in the starting lineup. I am petrified of using a weekly move to find out he's getting bumped back to the bench because Scott Brooks just wants to screw with me, and having to just ride it the rest of the week. Because if you pick up a Wizard, you're sticking with him. You're not getting out from under it now. 4 games the rest of this week is as good as it gets, so you're not going to move to a different guy and not gain a game played. You're just sort of stuck with it. So you really want to be careful, and you really want to be sure. But if we find out that Thomas Bryant is going to continue to start for this team, then he's a must-start guy. And I mean, he was in 9 category anyway. But depending on your format, you may need to dance around a little bit in the streaming realm. Still, good choices on this team. Even Troy Brown is a possible choice. He's been doing more. I don't think he's going to get the requisite number of shots to be a factor, but he is certainly a guy worth keeping an eye on. And then with the Lakers, you got KCP, you got Caruso. Okay, that's probably it. And that, I suppose, takes care of the Tuesday streaming action. It really is a difficult week for streaming because there's very few teams that have 3 games the first 4 days of the week. I think Orlando might be, if I'm not mistaken, it might be the only one that has 3 the first 4 days. And then very few teams that actually have 3 the final 4 days. Denver, who we've already sort of used up a little bit. The Clippers, the Lakers don't because they're a back-to-back today and tomorrow. And the Kings, and that's it. Washington also doesn't because they're a back-to-back today and tomorrow. So you really have to position yourself, and I know I've said I really like saving moves for the end of the week. I think your moves this week are probably yesterday, today, and Friday would be my guess. Because you have these teams that go 2 times through Thursday, that have only one game the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And there are a lot of teams that have 2 games between Friday through Sunday. Good players that'll be on the waiver wire. It doesn't limit you quite as much. Teams that fit that mold: Washington, Sacramento, Portland, Oklahoma City, Minnesota actually is in that mix. So you get another team added in that maybe you weren't thinking of before. Memphis, the Lakers, the Clippers, the Pacers, the Warriors, the Nuggets, we've talked about them, Charlotte, Boston, and Atlanta. They all get back into the mix when you look at just Friday through Sunday. So if you can find a way to get through Thursday with your beginning of the week clowns, then you've got a pretty good option the rest of the week. Or you just hold out through guys that aren't playing on Sunday. You make your moves on the last day. It's a hard week, though. It's a hard week for streaming. I want to keep this thing on the brief side. Like I said, once I got into the streaming stuff, then things started to take a little bit longer, but I thought it was worth getting into. Please do hit me up on Twitter with questions about streaming during the day. Once the games start, I'm probably going to be away for a little bit. I'm not going to be at my computer answering questions as they're going. But, morning, midday, if you have streaming thoughts, feel free to hit me with them, because I'm staring this stuff down all day long also, just like you, and trying to figure out the best way to sort of piecemeal this thing together with the very limited number of moves we have and the difficulty of setting the week up for any of this stuff. It's not easy. Tomorrow, DFS contest with Mike Apotria. That's what we got coming up on the podcast. Make sure to rate and review the show, and we'll get you in and out on this one. Under half an hour. Oh, man, this one saves the voice. You guys don't know. This is like the ultimate help for me. Really looking forward to talking to Mike tomorrow. See if we can get a victory on our DFS card. How many games are there on Wednesday this week? Only 5, so that should be a weird one. I think the contest is Wednesday. I haven't heard anything yet. Uh-oh. We better check with DraftKings. Stay tuned. We'll get you that link when it comes out. I am Dan Besbris. This is Tuesday's half-size edition of Fantasy NBA Today. Enjoy the night. Good luck. Big card tonight. Hope you guys, your rosters can handle it. And we'll talk to you after. Figure out what the hell's going on Wednesday. So long.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.